Sup, chooms? I hope everything is Nova and you're all having a preem week. So my viewers have recently brought to my attention some breaking news from the news organization Reuters. It was reported that a court ordered secret documents from Merck to be unsealed and released to the public, which allegedly show that Merck knew that the drug they manufacture, Propecia, has a trail of suicide reports directly linking the drug to suicidal behavior. This naturally has caused a lot of hysteria, fear, and resentment in the hair loss community, so I feel it is necessary to address this and offer my own perspective. But before I do, I want to note that I take the subject of suicide very seriously. If you or anyone you know is considering suicide, be aware that there is help available to you. The number to the suicide hotline is 1-800-273-TALK or 8255, and I'll link that number below in case you missed it. So, getting to the subject at hand, I think it is important that people remember that lawsuits are not science, and their outcomes aren't necessarily based on facts. People and organizations get sued for bullshit reasons literally every single day in the USA, and the USA where the lawsuit is taking place is especially notorious as being the most litigious society in the world. An article from the New York Times even mentions that we, the United States, spend about 2.2% of our entire GDP, which is roughly $310 billion per year, on tort litigation, which equates to about $1,000 per person. This is far higher than any other nation in the world, and about half of this is for transaction cost, namely legal fees. But before lawsuits, how would the United States resolve problems that people and parties would have between each other? Well, they'd usually do it through things like state-sanctioned dueling, but now that that's no longer allowed, people will seek justice by going after their enemy's money through a civil court, and where there is money, there is business. And over the years, and after countless many lawsuits, most of this litigation has been more about getting rich based off of frivolous, unsubstantiated damages, since oftentimes a judge or a jury can be persuaded by emotion rather than scientific evidence. And this case is just yet another example of a frivolous lawsuit that has gotten a lot of attention, since there is a large list of vexatious litigants who have long been trying to sue Merck for many, many years now, and they're hoping that this is the smoking gun they need to finally get their millions off of their imaginary and nocebo-driven fake condition they think finasteride is somehow responsible for. So it is important to remember that whether the litigation is based on facts or not, drug companies do not like being sued. As of 2018, in fact, if you go to the website drugwatch.com, which documents lawsuits against drug companies, it is shown that Merck, in just that year alone, paid nearly $4.3 million to settle 562 Propecia lawsuits, and over 1,000 men sued Merck because of Propecia. In United States criminal court, people do have a Fifth Amendment right to fair representation, but this does not apply to civil court. In civil court, you are completely on your own, and you have to foot your own bill, regardless of how frivolous the lawsuit is. So companies like Merck will often push for a settlement, regardless of how garbage the claims against them are, simply because a settlement in the long run is cheaper than defending a lawsuit over many months or even many years, which can rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees per individual case. So a settlement is not an admission of guilt. It's an admission of wanting to be done with the bullshit and left alone, even if it means paying some money to stop all of the harassment. So this lawsuit, which eventually led to the court order to have the Merck documents unsealed and released, is yet another example of one of these frivolous bullshit lawsuits. What was being claimed by the damaged party specifically in this lawsuit is that Merck knew about the supposed suicide risk of their drug and decided not to warn consumers in a 2011 update of their drug labeling. So, some big cover-up apparently. So Reuters, being a news organization, requested that the secret documents be released under the Freedom of Information Act, which is something that gives it's basically just something that gives the press a right to know information from the government. The data released from this document, which got everybody's attention, was that since 2011, there had been 700 reports of suicide attempts or suicidal thoughts, with at least 100 deaths in people taking finasteride. Before that, in the previous 14 years of the drug's availability, there were 34 reports of suicidal thoughts and 10 confirmed deaths. Now, the the number of prescriptions for finasteride in the US alone is 2.4 million per year as of last year, and finasteride is the 87th most prescribed drug in the entire world. So one has to wonder, and I'm not saying this to minimize the seriousness of the situation. I mean, deaths are a serious situation, they're tragic and all that and everything, but is 700 suicides over the last 9 years really as high as it seems? Well, to put this into perspective, according to the National Health Institute, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, with 48,000 people dying every year from it, and with the most recent statistics being from 2018. And with COVID-19 having increased depression in many individuals who are staying at home under lockdown, we can only speculate that the number has increased since 2018, but based on the 2018 statistics, suicide is the second leading cause of death in people aged 10 to 34 years old, as well as the fourth leading cause of death in people aged 35 to 54 years old. Suicide is also 3.7 times higher in men than it is in women, and suicide rates have increased 35% over the last 20 years, which is quite a lot if you think about it. So suicide rates are already highest in young men who are probably the most emotionally afflicted by androgenic alopecia, since they're at a stage in their life where their appearance and identity are especially important to them, since they are still at a point where their appearance could be critical to their self-image, since people will make judgments about others based on how they look, whether that is fair or not. This is known as the halo effect, where people will make judgments about you based on your appearance, and people who look better tend to be treated better by others and have a better chance of advancing in life. So given all this, is 100 deaths by suicide and men taking finasteride over the past decade really that astronomically high? Well, it is known that finasteride can, in some cases, very, very rarely cause depression. It is, like I said, though, a very rare side effect. It is, in fact, so rare and so low that we didn't even know about it during the initial clinical trials, where thousands of people were tested on the drug, and it was only added to the package insert in 2011. So at the time they added depression, there was also a question as to whether or not they should add suicide as a complication from taking the drug. So the FDA looked at this, and they ended up deciding from the data that it was not necessary to add suicide as a warning on the package insert. One of the FDA evaluators who looked at the 9 suicides in question at the time in 2010 said that they were difficult to assess due to incomplete information. However, she did say, quote, "We cannot exclude that finasteride may have contributed to these events," unquote. However, there were 2 other FDA reviewers who disagreed with this. They were physicians, and they said that the data supported adding depression to the label but not suicide because the number of suicidal thoughts, attempts, and deaths was, quote, "lower than would be expected in this patient population," unquote. So the FDA actually decided that the number of suicides was less than they would expect, and that this is why suicide was not added to the package insert. Keep in mind, suicide as a risk factor is not uncommon in pharmaceuticals. Even antidepressants list suicide or suicidal ideation as a possible side effect. In the case of finasteride, though, it was determined that the risk was so low that the FDA, which is an independent organization from Merck, didn't think it was worth adding. On the other hand, people who are depressed can become suicidal, so clearly people with depression or who develop depression on finasteride should talk to their doctor about making titration adjustments, or if necessary, stopping the drug. Keep in mind, though, depression is very, very multifactorial. Just because you are depressed and may develop suicidal thoughts while you're on finasteride doesn't mean the finasteride is what caused it. Hair loss itself is already a very mentally debilitating condition, so it could easily be theorized that hair loss itself may contribute to suicide, especially in young men when having a full, thick head of hair is so important to them maintaining their identity. Telling people to just shave it, bro, isn't going to work for everybody because, let's face it, most people don't want to look like slapheads. That is why drugs like finasteride are so popular to begin with. Merck themselves have touched on this issue and said, quote, "Premature hair loss itself, the very condition for which Propecia is prescribed, is associated with low self-esteem, poor body image, and depression," unquote. I couldn't agree more. I have done many things to improve my life and self-image over the years, such as working out, changing my lifestyle, changing my career path, and earning a lot more money. And even though all those helped, nothing made me feel better than saving my hair. Not only do I feel better, but people around me, including my coworkers, my friends, my loved ones, all treat me better and show me much more respect. First impressions are key to establishing good relations with those around you, and nothing leaves a good impression better than a full head of hair. I don't care how much you work out or how much muscle you build. If you look bald, most people are going to think you either look like a thug or have some sort of contagious disease, and they won't want to be around you. Hair loss is a huge cosmetic defect and an evil mistake of nature and evolution. Finasteride is that shield against this great evil. I myself have suffered with depression, and I have used many antidepressants. Some of them even helped me out a bit, but none were as effective at treating my depression as finasteride. Having a full head of hair kills depression like you wouldn't even believe. Some may ask that, regardless of their intentions, should Merck be punished for keeping this information a secret? Well, remember, this is strictly a legal matter, so that was ultimately up for a judge to decide about keeping the document secret. I'm sure that Merck was trying to avoid frivolous lawsuits, like all the lawsuits out there claiming that vaccines cause autism. Because like I said earlier, just because someone gets sued doesn't mean the lawsuit is grounded in scientific evidence. The fact that the FDA did not think that the incidence of suicide was enough to list it as a side effect, I think, is enough evidence for Merck to make their claim that it was not worth adding suicide as an adverse outcome to the packaging. Keep in mind, the FDA is a government organization. It is not in the pockets of the drug company. On the contrary, drugs, even very profitable drugs like Vioxx, get pulled off the market all the time. So I don't think this is some big conspiracy or big cover-up. I mean, I know the PFS crowd is salivating over this, and probably Merck will have to deal with a whole slew of new bullshit lawsuits because of this, but in the end, finasteride is never going to be taken off the market. These anti-finasteride clowns will always be a fringe movement, and from a purely utilitarian standpoint, the amount of good finasteride has caused will always infinitely outweigh the few negatives that the anti-finasteride crowd loves to fixate over and completely exaggerate. I mean, we all know that not everybody is going to have a great reaction to every drug. And, I didn't have a great reaction to certain antidepressants, but I would never go so far as to suggest that antidepressants should be taken off the market just because of my negative experience. I know I'm an outlier, and I know that would be horrifically selfish because I know the greater good they cause, and people going after finasteride just because they didn't have a good experience with it are just completely selfish because they want to deprive the hair loss community of its absolute best treatment just so they can better cope with their decision not to use it. And that's pretty messed up if you ask me. So, that's all I wanted to say about this. Again, check the suicide hotline if you have any suicidal thoughts. And if you're feeling down, check out the new Hitman game, I should say. I heard it's pretty badass. But anyways, peace out. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Let me show you guys this. This is a new coffee mug I got. Hairguard got this for me for Christmas. I think he's hoping I don't review any of his products anymore. Just kidding. He didn't do that. And, I'm going to review more of his products anyways. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Take care.